Coming up on Windows Weekly, I, Micah Sargent, am in for Leo Laporte this week, and there's plenty to get to. First, Windows 11, we've got some new updates worth checking out. The adoption rate continues to climb. Then we talk about Front Row for Teams. That's starting to roll out. We talk about Loops and Loop and the Microsoft Lists app. I went in and set up my own set of lists. We get to earnings. We talk about ad tracking and all of the browsers kind of clapping back at Google. We get into, of course, Xbox and gaming, plus so much more. This is a fantastic episode of Windows Weekly, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Windows Weekly, episode 762, recorded February 2nd, 2022. Diagonal Shards. This episode of Windows Weekly is brought to you by PlexTrack, the purple teaming platform. Save time and increase productivity with the premier cybersecurity reporting and workflow management product designed to support proactive security strategy from assessment through remediation. Visit plextrack.com/twit and claim your free month. And by Melissa. The U.S. Postal Service processes more than 98,000 address changes daily. Make sure your customer contact data is up to date. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. Well, hello there. It is time for Windows Weekly, and if you're listening or watching, you can very clearly tell that it is not Leo Laporte here. No, it is I, Micah Sargent, who is in for Leo this week while he is on vacation. We're very happy for him to get to take a bit of a break, but I'm so excited to be co-hosting Windows Weekly today with two incredible people. It's your regular panel of Mary Jo Foley and Paul Thurrott. Hello, both of you.
Hello, not Leo.
Hello. Paul Thurrott, of course, of Thurrott.com, joining us from lower, is it Makunji or Makungi?
Yeah, Google says both. It's Makunji.
Makunji. And of course, Mary Jo Foley of All About Microsoft, the ZDNet blog. Hello, Mary Jo.
Hello, Micah.
Goodbye.
Nice to see you again on our show.
It is nice to see you as well. I always enjoy my time on Windows Weekly, and there's a lot to talk about today. Per usual, we're starting out with Windows 11 because as Windows 11 continues to mature, if you will, it continues to add new features. So what are we working with this week?
I guess it is kind of like a fine wine, getting better over time. Or, cynically, it could only get better. So one of the things we've been bringing up a lot lately is this notion of Windows 11 improving before the next feature update and how and when Microsoft might do that. Last week, there was an announcement along the lines of sometime in February, they're going to start deploying new features for Windows 11. Not a lot of new stuff, but I think 3-ish actual OS features, a couple of new apps, and then the beta version or pre-release version, preview version, of the Android app compatibility that everybody seems to want for some reason. But the other thing that happened was I guess it would have been last Tuesday. I didn't really see it until later in the week. In fact, I guess it would have been after the show. But as part of the non-existent week D, right, in the schedule, right, I think people who follow Windows updates understand we have the B week of each month is the Patch Tuesday. There's this notion of a C week, which is the third week. And then last week is I'll call it the D week. I don't think that's the name. But sometimes that week they'll release previews of cumulative updates that are going to come out the following month. And I think we just got a hint of how those new features are going to be rolled out, which is via a cumulative update, because we got a preview cumulative update of an update that will ship in February that included a new feature, which is an addition to the Settings app in Windows 11 that lets you see, not really manage so much, but see a lot of information related to your Microsoft account. And then they have links in there where you can go to the web and where you actually do that stuff. And it's a fine feature. It's kind of a neat feature, I think, mostly because a lot of people probably don't even know that this stuff is possible with their account, but there's a lot of management activities you can do around your Microsoft account, and it is available from this interface. But more important, I guess, is this speculation about how would they deliver these things, right? And I guess also I had mentioned this might be technically the second new feature. Actually, it's probably technically the third. Microsoft had added some emojis to Windows 11 at some point. I'm surprised that wasn't met with more excitement. And also the
It was.
update, maybe not in these circles. And also the update to that defaults app interface, which is so controversial, where they're blocking attempts by third parties to circumvent the protocol handlers for web browsers. But so this is the third one, I guess.
I have a question about this account management thing. Did this ever go to testers in the Insider program?
Yes,
That
and
you
I
know
actually
of?
had to look this up. Yeah, so this, by the way, first announced way back in late October. And
wow.
at that point, it went to the dev channel. The interesting thing is it was released to the beta and release preview channel simultaneously on January 14th, which was it 1 week? I can't remember if it was 1 or 2. I'd have to look at I could just look at a calendar and find out.
Was it Patch Tuesday?
It is, the 14th is a Friday. So it was about 10 days before it arrived broadly in preview form, right? So in other words, for anyone who has Windows 11, right, not in the Insider program, can go to Windows Update. This will not install by, automatically, even if you check for updates, but it will appear. It's KB 583.53. Oddly, in Windows Update, I believe it doesn't say it's a preview, but it is a preview. If you look it up on the web, it does say preview. It's something that will go out to everybody next month or I guess this month. Sorry, now it's this month, so probably next Tuesday, which I think, by the way, is when all those other features are going to appear too.
I know. I bet you're right about how they're going to do this, which is cumulative updates. That makes the most sense given how they've been kind of positioning cumulative updates, right? There are two things that won't be in there, though. The new Notepad app and the new music player. Those will be separate, right? Those will be store.
Yeah, those will be in the store, basically.
Yeah.
So that's the type. Most people are not going to check for this stuff. So Tuesday will come and go. No one will see any of this stuff. But at some point, these things will install. Your PC will probably have to be rebooted, so you'll probably notice it. And then those two apps you mentioned, Notepad and Media Player, they'll update at some point through the store. I think that might take just a couple of days, but it's the type of thing, obviously you have to go run the app to see if anything happened. You're not going to just notice it, but those should appear pretty quickly, I would imagine.
All right. Well, I am the seeker. So.
Kev Brewer is saying in Discord he got the media player yesterday.
Oh, there you go. That's interesting.
So,
I want to check. Can you ask him if he is the Insider program, or is this like just unstable?
Yeah, I'm asking him. He's
That's
doing
curious.
it. Stable.
I mean, technically it is February, right? Those can happen at any time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
that's what I was just thinking. I'm like, it's February, so I guess it's in the
why not?
store. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
All right.
And we beat this to death already, but for those who don't know, the Media Player app is a store app. It's a replacement of the Groove app. It's, this is not the Windows Media Player 8 days or whatever. It was this awesome all-in-one thing with integrated stores, and you could buy music and stream, do streaming radio and all that stuff. It's nothing like that. It's for playing back the music and video files that you have on your PC.
Yeah.
Kind of a simple app. I do not see it. I would love to get that app now, though. That would be good.
Oh, no, you don't have it yet? How does that work? What is
No,
are you in
here's how-
cohorts? Are these
No, let me
I do have
explain
it.
this.
I actually have it.
Oh, I was just going to
It
say,
must
the
have come
way
in
it works
already.
is
Yeah.
Microsoft usually blocks Paul Thurrott from getting any app
Got it.
updates. So he's the last person to get it. They do this consciously, I'm sure. So yeah.
Paul Thurrott's
I
IP?
have a rich history. That's true. I think I was
See, that's
literally
why-
the last human being on earth to get the Outlook.com update a couple of years ago.
You pretty
They
much
actually block everyone in Lower Makunji. If you wouldn't have put
That's
your,
it.
That's right.
your location.
Right.
then
Everyone's
there
here
would've
is
been
still
an
on
issue.
Windows 7. They have no idea this other stuff has even happened.
right.
I'm surprised they haven't blocked Mary Jo Foley yet, though, because Mary Jo, you like to ask them, "Hey, can I try this thing that?"
Actually, that's
Yeah,
the problem.
exactly.
Mary Jo asks. I just figure out how to get it, and then they get mad at me.
No, I
just
ask.
say no
they
to
say
her.
no. Right. I ask. They say no, and then I get it in another way, like a
Yeah,
nicer way. You know,
quote unquote nicer way.
nicer.
So usage is up on Windows 11 now.
Yeah, so this is one of those things. This is this is always one of those debatable topics because we don't get these numbers from Microsoft, right? Microsoft will never say, this is how many of anything that have ever happened. This is where we are with Windows 10. They're not going to do this. So we have third-party companies. AdDuplex has been doing this for a long time. They're basically measuring they're looking at Windows Store apps, and these are running on PCs, and they're determining what version of Windows are running those things. And it's based on a survey of, it's always tens of thousands of PCs. I think in this case, 60,000 PCs. So it doesn't cover some things like the people that aren't running, not running store apps, but running the particular store apps that these guys can measure. But it's still, because we don't really get anything official, it's kind of a nice rough number to see what's going on out in the world, kind of in the non-corporate world, I guess is what I'd call it. Obviously, the two biggest versions of Windows by usage today are versions of Windows 10, and they are the previous two versions, not the very latest version, which is now just starting to grow. So Windows 10 version 21H1 has 28.6%. Is the biggest version, 28% of the I guess not the install base so much as the usage base, or whatever you want to call that. 26.3 are on Windows 10 version 20H2. And then Windows 11 is in third place now with 16.1%. And so if you're interested in horrible math, I've got some for you. Microsoft recently, why not? Let's extrapolate this. Microsoft recently said that there were 1.4 billion PCs, not users, but PCs out in the world running Windows 10 and 11. If 16.1% of those are running Windows 11, then there are approximately 225 million Windows 11 PCs / users out in the world. I realize these things are not directly, that's why I said it was terrible math. But just as kind of a random fact that is true, because I just happened to write about this, Microsoft 20-something years ago released Windows XP, so 20 years ago, I guess. And in October, which was the same month that Windows 11 shipped. And when this figure is from January, which is the same month that Microsoft released the first sales numbers for Windows XP. And that number was 17 million. And it was considered an incredible success story. So there are many, many more times the number of computers running Windows 11 now in the same time period. Granted, no one has paid for that per se, although some people have bought new computers. A lot of that's going to be free upgrades, so it's a different world. And even though the PC market, slowed there for a long time, we've seen some good growth the past couple of years. It's been sitting still mostly for the past 10 years. It's still a lot bigger than it was 20 years ago, the market for PCs. So that's kind of interesting. Windows XP was considered a big success at the time, other than that whole security thing we're not going to talk about. But, Windows 11's been kind of quiet, but actually it's going out pretty quickly too. So Microsoft's made it a lot easier to upgrade over the intervening 20 years for sure.
Yeah. Part of the reason they can't really say how many Windows, they can't give us a good comparative metric with Windows 11 is because not every PC can upgrade to Windows 11. So,
yes.
Usually when they tell you, X number of PCs are now on Windows 10 instead of Windows 8, it's because you can move off of that one onto the next one, and there's nothing hardware-wise typically that is blocking you.
Yeah.
There may be a few cases of that, right? But with Windows 11, because of their designations around TPM and CPUs, not every PC is eligible, or if you aren't, you have to take a chance and maybe get updates in the future, maybe not, and just go for it and get Windows 11 on your non-compliant device. So this is going to make it hard for them to give us a number, right?
Yeah. This is not the type of thing your mother or my mother would ever consider doing.
No.
It's like, I really want to get Windows 11,
what?
but I know I don't have a TPM.
No. But my mom, I'm waiting for my mom to get the message where it'll be like, do you want to upgrade to Windows 11? I'm going to get a call someday, probably right in a very inopportune time, like during the show, perhaps, and my mom will call
Right.
and say,
What kind of computer
so
does
what
she
should
have?
I do? She has a very up-to-date HP that I had and I gave to her. So it definitely is able to run Windows
Yeah.
11.
Okay. Yep.
Yep. I'm just waiting for the panic sounds of my mom hyperventilating because she's like, wait, I just got used to Windows 10 and now I'm going to have to go to something else.
I was just.
I actually think she would like Windows 11. I do. I think she would like do well
Yeah,
with it. But-
right. I mentioned, I think last week or the week before, I mentioned my wife and
Yeah.
how she had gotten that upgrade, and some weeks had gone by, and I said, hey, how's it going? Is it all right or whatever? And do you like it? And she says, it's the same.
Yeah.
And
That's
I-
what I
we
think
were
my
on
mom
the-
would say too.
Yeah. I mean, flying home the other day, I looked over at her computer, and, she was writing away, and all kinds of problems with the way she's working. I had to really kind of bite my tongue, like, I don't know why this is configured the way it is, but I was sort of reflecting on. I didn't say anything because that's
Good
why I
job.
stayed married
Good
for 30
job.
years.
Good job.
But I thought about it, and at one point she was doing something in the File Explorer, which in Windows 11 is kind of this light blue color on her computer, and I was thinking to myself, man, like that, it just looks different. Like I'm surprised she is, didn't really notice anything, because she just claims that it's like no big, it was nothing.
Yeah.
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 I'm still
That's the
learning to not
difference.
say anything because
Yeah.
Yeah.
so much you want to help, especially if you just
Yep.
want to help the person. And just this
Yeah.
morning, my partner was saying something about doing a thing a certain way, and I thought,
Yeah.
now
you're like,
you could do it
are
this
you
way,
broken
and
inside?
It would be easier.
I mean, you could if you wanted to take all day, or
Yeah,
here's an idea.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I still remember Paul watching me in horror when we were driving somewhere, and I was writing a story
I know.
in Notepad.
We were driving
full
to
screen.
Twit. We were in the back
Yeah, we
of
were
a car
driving a
going
Twit
to
in a
Twit.
limo, right? And
Yeah,
I'm like
that's
writing
right.
a story in the back seat, and I have Notepad full screen, and he's like, "What are you doing?"
I was like, what the hell are you doing?
I'm like, "I'm writing a story," and you're like, "What? Like, is this the way you work?" Like,
That was unbelievable.
Oh my gosh, that's just that idea of going in and seeing the way that somebody works, and just I thought I knew you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
everyone has their ways. You should let people keep their ways, right? Like, if it works for them, let them keep it.
Exactly.
Do you think we're going to continue? Is the 16.1%? Is this just what you generally expect from? I guess what I'm asking is, have in the past there been updates that people kind of rushed to a little bit more, and so we saw kind of an adoption rate that was a lot faster?
So yeah. So the answer to that is yes. The problem is the time that happened most recently was Windows 10, and the reason that happened was twofold. Windows 8 was terrible, and Windows 10 was free, right? And so this was like a get out of jail free card for a lot of people. The problem is at that time we didn't have these numbers. AdDuplex, for example, didn't start measuring this type of thing until about a year or two later. So that initial bump is kind of a mystery right now, but there's no doubt that happened more quickly. There's no doubt, just because the situation was so perfect for that. If you flash forward to today, in addition to what Mary Jo said, which is absolutely correct, there's a certain percentage of PCs out in the world that don't have TPM2 or don't have it enabled or whatever it is, and those computers just kind of won't get it, and you just won't notice. There's much less of an incentive because Windows 10 works fine. And a lot of normal people, I'll throw my wife into that bucket, they'll get that upgrade and won't even notice anyway. And it's just not as important. That may change a little bit over time.
There's business customers, right? I know so many business users who are like, I got the notification and I'm not going to Windows 11. Like, everybody in my company's on 10, or we standardize on 10. We haven't really tested everything to make sure it's going to be okay on Windows 11, which it highly likely will be, because Windows 11 is really just Windows 10. And a lot of people are putting it off, and they said, I got the reminder and I'm just either I turned it off or I am going to let it keep popping up, but I'm not ready to move, right?
Yeah. When you think of this notion of Windows 10/11 PCs or users, it's like, these things are comparable. It's fine. It will shift over time. I mean, obviously, Windows 11 becomes the thing at some point, as far as you will have a complete year now where most computers will ship with Windows 11, not Windows 10, right?
Yeah.
We'll have more upgrades happening over time. Of course, we'll have new PCs sold, and that will change the mix. And at some point, Windows 11 will surpass Windows 10 from a usage perspective, and then Windows 10 eventually will fall out of support. Right? We're not how far away from that now? 3.5 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's not a rush. I mean, the big thing. Remember, you kind of forget about this, and we shouldn't. Microsoft promised to get to 1 billion Windows 10 users within a year, I think, or a year and a half, maybe, or whatever the time frame was originally, and never did that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We don't have to get into that again. But this time around, there's no imperative for that. The user base is in a good place. You could even look at whether or not you believe ad duplex numbers or not. They show that thing that Microsoft always wanted. What they really want is everyone to be on one version of Windows. That's not possible. But they're really on three major, and they're the three most recent major versions of Windows. And that's great, from a servicing perspective. So
yeah,
they're in a good place.
Good. All right. Oh, and if you want to mention the related item before we take a break.
Yeah. So I want every January, I look at PC sales. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. And PC sales doing great thanks to the pandemic. So obviously, COVID's the best thing that's ever happened. It's great. And there are related reports coming about things like tablets, smartphones, and to a lesser degree, Chromebooks. So I try to look at data from both IDC and Gartner for all this stuff. So the PC stuff is out. But when it comes to tablets and smartphones, I only have IDC data, so I'm not really writing about that yet. Chromebooks are kind of a small slice of the market, and only IDC data is out again. And I don't think that Gartner's going to call them out, so I thought I'd just write about this because it's kind of interesting. So Chromebooks, like Windows PCs, saw big growth during the pandemic. Last year, overall, they grew 13.5%, which is actually pretty close to the growth level that Windows PCs saw. The difference is that in the fourth quarter, they fell 63.6% year over year. Crazy, like off the side of a cliff fall. And the explanation for this is kind of interesting. Part of it is just that demand had finally been met, right, in primary markets, which is the U.S. and Western Europe. So that leads to a slowdown. But the other part of it is because of the component crisis, hardware makers, because if you look at the list of top Chromebook makers, it mirrors PCs basically. It's HP, Lenovo, Acer, Dell, and Samsung are the top five. They decided, because of the component crisis, that they were going to prioritize Windows PCs because Windows PCs sell for more, and thus they make more money for them. So that actually suppressed Chromebook sales in the fourth quarter. So part of it was natural. We've had a good 2 years run there, but part of it was artificial. Hardware makers decided to prioritize PCs over Chromebooks. Interesting. PCs are not a high volume.
I love that this was public, by the way.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, right?
It's because OEMs will never do that kind of thing. They'll never say, well, the real reason we decided to do this is because we make a lot more money if we sell the more expensive device. Yep. It's like, wait, you just were so honest. What just happened here, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I said high volume. I meant high margin. Like PCs are not high margin devices to begin with.
No.
Chromebooks must be as razor thin as you can imagine. It must be almost nothing. Because they really don't, the average price of a Chromebook has got to be under $500.
Right.
The average price of a PC is somewhere close to $1,000. Mm-hmm. I would think.
It made me think, because a week ago during earnings, Satya just threw out this thing and said it, or maybe it was Amy Hood, the CFO, and we're taking share with Windows. And I was like, what, from who? Like
from whom?
Mac?
Yeah, exactly.
And they never said, but now I'm like, maybe they meant Chromebooks, maybe that's what they meant.
If so, I mean, talk about, they really needed an asterisk on that, right? Like, yeah, you are, but only because there was this external force.
But earnings, the less information you can provide, the better. So
they didn't lie.
Exactly.
I mean, they didn't, it's a fact. They did take share from Chromebooks.
Not a factoid, it's a fact.
Although, by the way, Chromebooks, if you're looking at the year, still are the second biggest computer platform on Earth after PCs.
Yep.
They're bigger than Macs.
Yep.
By volume.
Volume, right.
Yeah.
They've taken the market. All right. Let's take a quick break.
They're the Rams of the market.
There you go. Exactly. What
Number
a
two.
perfect Yeah, what a perfect comparison there. I want to tell you about PlexTrack while we take this little break, because PlexTrack's bringing you this episode of Windows Weekly. It is the premier cybersecurity reporting and workflow management platform that empowers teams to win the right security battles. What if you could streamline the communication across the entire security department so that every team member could do their job more efficiently? From simplified data aggregation and reporting to integrated ticketing for remediation to analytics and visualizations for board reporting, PlexTrack touches every aspect of the security management workflow. That means you can gain a real-time view of your security posture by bringing all your data sources together into one powerful platform where you can triage scanner results, generate powerful analytics and visualizations, assign remediation tasks, attest to your posture, and track progress over time. As a satisfied PlexTrack client put it, we see PlexTrack as a part of our strategy to move quicker and be proactive. Now we have a real-time view of what we need to focus on, and I have an easy way of showing senior leadership. PlexTrack serves every aspect of the enterprise security team program with features designed to improve workflow, collaboration, and communication for each role. Here are some of those things. Red team data aggregation, so you can import data from all your automated vulnerability scanners and tools, triage, and report results in half the time. Blue team remediation. You can assign remediation tasks right on the platform or through simple integrations with the ticketing tools your team already uses, and you can track your progress over time. Stakeholder communication, giving you the power to use powerful yet simple analytics to attest to security posture and prioritize issues. You can tailor attestation and communication to the needs of both the team members and the C-suite. And then continuous purple teaming assessment. You can begin purple teaming or power up your current strategies with Runbooks, the best in-industry tool for test plan execution. PlexTrack improves the entire security engagement lifecycle by making it easy to generate security reports, deliver them securely, and track the issues to completion straight from the platform, so security teams of all sizes and maturities can maximize efficiency and effectiveness. Book a demo today to learn more about the product and how it can support proactive security work in your organization. Try PlexTrack free for 1 month and see how it can change your life as a security professional. All you have to do is go to plextrack.com/twit and claim your free month. In case you're wondering how that's spelled, that's plextrac.com/TWIT. And of course, thank you, PlexTrack, for your support of this show and of Twit. We appreciate it. PlexTrack, the purple teaming platform. All right, let's head back into the news. First, Microsoft 365. This is an interesting conversation about Teams. I saw this bit of news with Front Row. What's going on here? How can I sit in the front row?
So now when you have meetings where some people are in the meeting room and some people are dialing in from home, the people who are dialing in from home, it's kind of like you're second-class citizens, right? You're in a video gallery, you're off to the side, the people in the room are having this conversation, and you're like, hey, guys, we're still here. We're here. Call on us, right? So Microsoft knows this. They know that hybrid meetings are kind of the future, even if people start going back into the office. And so they've been trying to come up with ways to make meetings better. And one of the ways is this feature in Teams called Front Row that they actually announced last June and is now available finally on Windows as of this week. So Front Row, it moves the video gallery down to the bottom of a Teams screen. So if you're in a big meeting room and you have a big monitor in front of you, everybody's on the same eye level. So it feels like you're actually, even though you're remote, you're in the room with the other participants who are physically there. I think this is a super cool idea, and it's very basic kind of, but to me, this is more natural than something like Together Mode, which is where Microsoft has these fake backgrounds and they put you in a coffee shop with all the other people in the meeting, or they put you in a stadium and so you see everybody's little cutout faces in a gallery. I like this Front Row thing because it's like, yeah, that's what you want to have. You want to have people feel like they're in the same room with you, And if there's some kind of a chat going on during the meeting, which inevitably there are these days, the chat will be visible to everybody. So not just the remote people will see the chat, but the people who are in the room also will see the chat on their larger screen. So what they're trying to do is make it like a blended environment where whether you're there physically or you're there remotely, it feels like you're all together in a real way. I like it. I think it's good.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Now, they said also that they've got some new features coming, and they said by the end of this year. But with the pandemic, whenever they give a time frame, it's probably like add 6 months, and that's more likely when. I'm not saying that critically. I'm just saying like almost nothing that gets announced it actually ships when they say it's going to. And it's not just Microsoft; it's everybody, right? So one of the things is they're going to bring that Loop app that we saw that kind of it's very similar to Notion. It's this idea of a new kind of collaborative app that uses the fluid framework technology into Teams meeting rooms so that if you're in a Teams meeting, you can pull up this app and everybody can be collaborating together on what looks like a giant shared whiteboard with your agenda, and you can see which people are contributing which things, and there's pointers. So they're going to bring that to this experience of the Teams rooms. And they're also going to bring something like Together Mode that I described earlier, where everybody can be if you're on a large monitor, everybody's in like a same background kind of effect so that it feels more like you're in the same physical space. So they're continuing to kind of look for ways to make hybrid meetings better. They're trying to make it so that you don't need to have special furniture or you have to have a giant screen monitor that'll work with basic PCs and basic conference room setups like people have now. So I think it's cool. This is the kind of research I like seeing Microsoft do because I'm like, it's applied, it's immediate. It doesn't need a lot of special extra stuff that you have to buy from them or partners. It just kind of works.
I know this makes me incredibly nerdy, but I always want to see case studies with this kind of thing because the Loop app sounds super cool. I would get so much out of watching like a team meeting take place and they're using the Loop app in this way. I want a trailer, I guess is what I'm saying. Give me a YouTube video showing them using it because I think it's a good idea. And especially what you're pointing out there, the fact that sure, you know, your company might be able to buy the $4,000, $5,000 screen that's got touch built into it or whatever, but not everybody can work that at home. And so giving them the ability to use this and collaborate is really nice.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree though. Let's see how people use it and like in a real world setting, is it really complicated to use, right? Because when we saw the demo of this at Ignite, the Loop app, I was like, it looks good, but it also looks like this could be really complicated to figure out, learn. Maybe if you used it repeatedly, or if you're used to working in a whiteboard environment in your company, that it wouldn't be such a stretch. But in my interactions on Teams, I don't use a whiteboard, right? I don't know if Paul does. He might.
This is to OneNote kind of what Windows 11 is to Windows 10, right? It's the same basic idea, simplified.
Yep.
And there are going to be people who love it because it's simpler, using it. And then there are going to be people who hate it because it doesn't have that exact feature they expect from the past.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
So is Loop only part of Teams calls, or will Loop exist as its own separate thing, or it's a feature that is exclusive to Teams calls?
Yeah, but there's loops and there's Loop. Just to make it really loopy. Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Yeah. What is loops versus Loop?
So the idea is when they first talked about Fluid Framework, they had this idea of really fast co-authoring that would enable you to take a component, say like a spreadsheet or any other kind of document, like a sales document, and embed it in a Teams chat or embed it anywhere, like in a OneNote document or anywhere you want in the Microsoft world, and maybe ultimately third-party world as well. And because of the fast co-authoring, it'll always be up to date. So anytime someone makes a change somewhere, it'll update it wherever it is if it's in Teams or wherever, and you'll always have the most up-to-date information, and they call those embedded things loops. Yeah. There's the Loop app and Loops components, basically.
And those components are subsets of Loop, or I should just consider those two completely different things?
The Loop app is more like a whiteboard, or like Notion, if you know what the Notion app is. And Loops are just like Olay for people in the Microsoft world. Olay, object linking and embedding components. That's Microsoft hates when you make that comparison, but that's kind of what this is. It's like components. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's why we keep using it, because they hate us to say it, so we just keep saying it.
Like Credge.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got Loop, Loops, Olay, which is not shampoo or soap or whatever, and lists. Tell us about lists.
Okay. This is Paul every once in a while jokes on the Start of Windows Weekly. She buried the lead. I buried the lead. This is the lead of this show today. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay. So Microsoft Lists, I don't use this feature. It came out of SharePoint when SharePoint used to have this thing called SharePoint Lists. Then Microsoft separated it out and made an app called Lists. There are people who love lists, right? Like some people live and die by lists. This is how they do their task management. I don't. I use my calendar to manage my task management tasks. Everyone has their own way, right? Some people use Google Keep. Some people use Notepad. If I would use Notepad if it existed on Android, but it doesn't. But Tasks is another one of these apps. The way Microsoft had been selling Tasks up to this point was you had to have an Office 365 or a Microsoft 365 subscription, and then you just get it for free. Well, this week they said, you know what? We're going to have a consumer version of Tasks, and all you need is a Microsoft account. You don't need to have a subscription to Microsoft 365. If you sign up, it's a limited preview, like the first 200,000 people can try this out. All you need is a Microsoft account. And if you have it, you can use this online application called Lists. They call it the Lists MSA preview. MSA is Microsoft account. And it gives you a subset of features of the other lists. Okay, so, that's fine. Like, yeah, okay, who cares? Now there's going to be a consumer-y version of lists, right? Here's why you should care. What they're doing, I finally figured this out. What they're doing is they're taking a lot of the things that are in Office, like lists, like OneNote probably is going to be another one, Planner, Tasks, To Do, and they're going to make consumer versions of all these things, just like they have Teams Enterprise and Teams Consumer. They're going to take all these things and they're going to make consumer versions of them, just like they did with Teams. And this is the thing that I couldn't quite figure out 2 years ago that I call Meta OS. That's what Microsoft calls it, right? That's what Microsoft calls it. And I was like, I don't totally know what this is, but they're doing something big. Like they're trying to replicate the enterprise experience in the consumer space. This is what this is. I'm 100% sure this is what this is. And so we've already got Teams Consumer and Teams Enterprise, and now we're going to have Lists Enterprise, List Consumer. Next will be like Planner, then To Do. They're going to do this with everything. And then they're going to try to make it just like they're trying to do with Teams, I would argue unsuccessfully so far. So the idea is people use this at work. So what if they give them the exact same product at home? And that's how we get consumers. We have the same thing. They get used to it at work and they come home and they still use it because they're used to it from working with it at work.
It's kind of impressive. I wanted to be part of that 200K or however many it was. So I went to the site. No, it's still open. And you can create an issue tracker, event itinerary, contents. I mean, lots of different things you can create from a CSV or start, from scratch. And it's got integrations enough that it can sort of pull in graphs and data. Well, this reminds me of oh golly, what is that? Monday. I think it's called Monday.com. Also a former sponsor on the network, just as a note, but it reminds me of some of the stuff that Monday.com does where it's sort of issue tracking, item tracking, all built into, lists. Interesting.
So anybody who's listening who wants to try this, list.live.com. All you need is a Microsoft account and it'll put you in there and you can start playing around with the preview. Now, Microsoft doesn't want us to talk about Meta OS because that's an internal name. And so that's why we keep talking about it, like I said earlier. But then yesterday, Jeff Teeper, who's a corporate VP at Microsoft, he's like Mr. SharePoint, Mr. OneDrive, right? He did this LinkedIn post that was so nerdy. He's a nerd, but this is ultimately super nerd, right? And what he said was, our next big technical bet. We're using SharePoint to power the consumer experience. I'm like, that's it. That's Meta OS right there.
That should freak out everybody who knows anything about SharePoint.
That everybody is. I know people who see this and they're like,
right.
Oh my God, they're using SharePoint in the consumer space? Isn't it complicated enough, right? And then he said, we re-architected SharePoint to per user shards, SHARDS, for consumer support. And we support Microsoft Account and Azure Active Directory. So they're trying to replicate, just like I'm saying, they're replicating or trying to replicate in the consumer space what they're doing in the enterprise. And because Jeff Teeper is instrumental in this, SharePoint, of course, has got to be a big part of it. If you were scared of SharePoint before, get ready. You're going to be really scared now.
That's crazy.
You asked at the end of last year how Microsoft was moving into the consumer space, since that's what they had sort of set one of their goals. And at the time, I think it was, other than in gaming, it was kind of not very clear. It seems like this is the year of making that movement.
If we went back a year and said, let's have a little roundtable, how do you think Microsoft's going to get back into the consumer market? Everyone threw out all their ideas. The one phrase that would never have come up ever, not once, would have been SharePoint.
SharePoint?
No one would have said SharePoint. I guarantee it.
And they especially wouldn't say SharePoint shards, right?
SharePoint
those
shards,
two things together, I'm like, no.
That sounds like some sort of gaming currency. Microsoft releases its first cryptocurrency. SharePoint shards.
A shard is a horizontal partition of data or database.
What makes it horizontal and not vertical?
You're asking the woman who knows the words around Hadoop but doesn't really know what it is. So I don't know. I'm not the one to answer this question, but I'm sure people in our audience know very well about sharding and shards. It's a thing.
Oh, God.
I'm positive they do.
How about diagonal? Is there
diagonal shards versus horizontal shards? Yeah.
Yeah. There's a show title, though. Sharding and Shards.
Yep.
Make sure you spell it with the D, people.
Yes,
That's how it's
be very clear. That's what Mary Jo was saying. All righty. Okay. Microsoft
It's tough
list.
to top that one, isn't it? It's tough to move on from that topic. But
yeah, plus I'm over here creating a content scheduler in Microsoft Lists now for a bunch of content that doesn't exist, but it's just fun to play around. I'm just a little sad because, oh no, never mind. I was wrong. I thought it had the little button in the top to let you share to one of those huge Microsoft screens, but it was actually just a share feedback button. So I can't.
It was a horizontal shard.
It was a horizontal shard that got into my diagonal shard, and I don't understand why it's here. Lots of other companies had earnings calls and revealed lots of stuff, and I think Paul is probably going to tell us about that.
Right, because I'm the bad math guy. I just throw this out for comparative purposes. Last week we talked about Microsoft's earnings, $51.7 billion in revenues, $18.8 billion in net income. So since then, we've had four of the other major players in the big tech space report earnings. I think Amazon's is probably tomorrow. But Intel, for hardware, we have Intel and AMD. Intel did annual as well as quarterly. I'll just stick to quarterly because not everyone's doing annual. But for the quarter, $20.5 billion in revenues, $4.6 billion in net income. AMD is a much smaller company, but probably their primary competitor for now anyway. $974 million in net income on revenues of $4.8 billion. So a much smaller company than Intel still. Alphabet, which earns 81% of its revenues from advertising, so it's unclear why we even consider it a big tech company. Net income of $20.6 billion on revenues of $75.3 billion. Crazy. Their second biggest business, this always amuses me. Let's see if I can get this name correctly. It's called Other. And other is non-advertising revenue. So hardware, Play Store, things like that. And then they have Google Cloud, which is sort of their competitor to whatever you want to call it, Microsoft 365, Azure, AWS, whatever. Pretty small.
Microsoft Cloud.
Comparatively.
Yeah.
Microsoft Cloud, yeah.
So
5.5 billion.
Yeah, the Google Cloud and the Microsoft Cloud are very comparable, right? Like they have Google Cloud, and then they also have Google Workspaces together, just like Microsoft puts Azure with. And then
it's a tiny business compared to Microsoft.
It's tiny, right? It's $5 billion, and Microsoft is $21 billion, and so that's why you always hear Google is a distant number 3 when you're comparing Microsoft and.
I mean, if you just want to look at like
Google.
the productivity and business processes business unit at Microsoft, which is responsible for Microsoft 365, Office 365, is $15.9 billion in revenues. Yeah, so it's over 5 times or about 5 times. I'm sorry. Sorry, see, bad math. I promised bad math.
You did
3
promise.
times.
Thank you.
3 times. 3 times bigger. And then Apple right now is the biggest of all these companies. I think Amazon will outdo them, holiday quarter and whatnot, but still, $34.6 billion in net income on revenues, record revenues, $124 billion. $124 billion. Just the iPhone by revenues is bigger than everything Microsoft does combined. $71.6 billion in revenues. Up 9%, and probably would have been up more, right, if it wasn't for the component thing. People get upset, by the way, for some reason when I compare the iPhone to Microsoft, as if these things were two completely different businesses. I mean, they are, obviously. But, you know, Apple and Microsoft have kind of this history together. It's fascinating that the way that Apple has evolved. Microsoft, I think, has followed a much more traditional evolution. If you were to go back and look what Microsoft was in the early 90s, late 90s, 20 years ago, whatever, and then saw what Microsoft was today, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But if you were to go back and look at Apple in the late 90s and compare it to what it is today, you'd be like, wait, what is this company? You know, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's crazy. Even services, just services, which, by the way, consists of money they make through third parties in the App Store as well as their own services. But still, that business is $19.5 billion. That's as big as Microsoft 365 and all of the other stuff in that part of Microsoft's business. And it's the growth has got to be higher, 24% year over year just in revenues. In services revenues. Microsoft's, that business unit, which was productivity and business processes, actually experienced 19% growth too. So the pandemic, like I said earlier, fantastic. Best thing that's ever happened. I hope it continues. Okay.
Golly. That's bad math.
That is bad
That's
math.
some bad math. That's some bad math. Yeah.
I end up being kind of numb to these numbers. Maybe that's why they call them numbers.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't fathom.
No, for sure.
When you get to those sizes, right? You're just like,
it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. We've all heard of compound interest and inertia, and you know, I'm sure this plays a role here somehow. But there's nothing can explain this success. We can, I mean, Monday morning quarterbacking, we can look and say, oh yeah, they did this thing and this worked out great, and we get that. But I don't think anyone could have looked at any of these businesses, like I said, 20 years ago, and plotted some trajectory. Right, where they combined are bigger than the gross national product of every country on earth. Basically, it's crazy. I'm exaggerating again. Bad math is all I can promise.
All right. Are we ready to move on from these big bad numbers into the browser wars?
Yeah, I didn't talk about this last week, but Google has spent the last couple of years promoting this notion of a privacy sandbox in Chrome, which sounds wonderful. And they had a technology called FLoC, which was going to replace third-party cookies, which are used to track users across the internet, with a proprietary Google technology that would track users across the internet. Because I just established that 81% of Google's revenues come from advertising. And the way they make money is to track you around the internet and sell that information to advertisers. That's literally their business, like in a nutshell. And it's not something that markets well. So they've been trying to find this way to continue tracking you, but make it sound like a good thing, you know? And basically everyone hated FLoC. So every browser maker on Earth, except for Microsoft, by the way, promised that they would block FLoC, which would limit the effectiveness of Google's coming new ad network called Skynet. Also not true. But anyway, and so Google has retrenched, and they're going to come out with something called Topics instead. And Topics is a fun new word that means FLoC. It's basically the same thing, right? So the idea here is that Google wants their browser and other browsers to track you as you move around the internet so they can share that information with advertisers. And the way that Tracker or the Topics differs from FLoC is actually fairly minimal. It basically sets up a set of interests that you have based on your activities on the internet, and so it gives that information to advertisers. So predictably, the more aggressive of the browser makers so far, Brave being number one, obviously, every time, and then Vivaldi have both come out against Topics. I would imagine Opera, Apple with Safari, I don't know about Microsoft, but Mozilla certainly, they're big on privacy, will come out against this as well. I don't know what to say. I mean, I feel like if you use Google Chrome, you need to be using extensions that block trackers like this. Mm-hmm. If you're not using Google Chrome, you also need to be using blockers that are blockers to trackers like this. Some of them have some built-in capabilities, Brave and Mozilla for sure. But this is just a weird turn of events. Like, I don't know. They just basically have gone public with this notion that, like, look, we want to track you, but we want it to be fun. And there are people who.
I like that. That is kind of how it is.
But there are some people who hear this and say, well, yeah, but if I'm going to see advertising on the internet, at least it's personalized. It's like, guys, why? What? Why would you? What are you talking about? We've all had that creepy moment, like you and I are on a phone call and we're talking about some kind of a washer dryer setup that Samsung makes or whatever, and then for some reason, for the next week on the New York Times, that's the only ad I see, even though we were talking about it, right? And you want this to be personalized? I mean, I don't know. So I don't know.
Yeah, that is an ongoing. I do keep hearing that where folks are saying, I would rather have. I think it was actually Leo who said something along the lines like, I'd rather have ads that matter to me than to have ads for barbed wire because I don't buy barbed wire. Mm-hmm. And
I think you should have ads for barbed wire because you don't need barbed wire, and there's one less thing you're buying for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, I fall more into that camp. I really do. The problem, of course, is that this, for example, is an ad-supported network, and it works a little different, of course. Right. But I can't be too down.
Hold on a second. This cuts. Okay, but this cuts to the heart of the matter. Mm-hmm. You are an ad-supported network, but you also offer an ad-free version where people can pay for the product and not have the ads. Mm-hmm. Related to this only somewhat this week, Wordle, suddenly the biggest game in the world, was purchased by the New York Times of some 7-figure number they're not going to disclose. The New York Times is the worst possible outcome for this thing because the New York Times has the model where you have to pay to access their content and you still get ads. If Google offered an option through Chrome where you could pay, who knows what the amount would be, I don't know, some amount per month or per year, not to see ads, right? I actually think that would be a successful business model. As long as it was the option like what you're doing, and I do this on my own website, I mean, not me personally, but the company that owns my site does this, offers an option where you can pay and not see ads, or you don't have to pay, obviously, and the content's free, but there will be ads. And to me, that's a common sense middle ground. At least you have both options. Right now, the way the web works is we act like it's free, and because we're not really paying, but we are paying, aren't we? I mean, and if anything, we're paying with our souls in a way. It is creepy to see the ads come up about things that maybe you searched for or talked about or whatever it might be. That's creepy, but it's worse than creepy, isn't it? It's a surveillance state. It's spyware. This would be illegal.
Mary Jo, I'm curious about your thoughts because I do agree to a certain extent, and honestly, not even necessarily for myself, but in the ongoing conversations that I have with people I very much care about who have genuine concern that their phone is listening with the microphone, or by walking into a house that has a certain thing that it's listening to them. And then you try to explain the way that it actually works, and that gets a little bit too nebulous for the non-tech person.
But then you go home and you
really
get an ad for this thing that will block this the surveillance thing that's in this other guy's house.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, how did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. Mary Jo, how do you feel about the ad stuff? I'm curious.
So I'm somebody who thinks we've all given up our privacy for convenience. And I know that's not something a lot of people like to admit, but that's how I feel about things. Like whenever I get ads, even if they're very personalized and I don't know how they get personalized, I'm like, you know what? I decided to use the web, or I decided to search for something that might have been tangentially related. And so, okay, my data's out there. I accept all cookies. I do all the things you're not supposed to do because I'm like, I just want to get this over with quick, accept the cookies. I don't care. Like, blah. I just don't expect to have privacy, and I've kind of come to grips with that.
So I still do advocate for and do my best to strive for a certain level of privacy, and I don't think that we should get to a place where we end up letting companies
Giving
just sort
up.
of
Yeah.
How close are you to that dog park again? Would you say it's
Oh God, I'm not saying anything else about the dog park.
if I was standing in the dog park and I was facing, I don't know, west.
Would you be able to see me waving my hand?
Right.
But okay, so this is the interesting thing. We had someone on Tech News Weekly last week to talk about FLoC versus topics and the difference between the two. And I said the same thing, that I asked rather, they seem like they're pretty much the same thing. What is the difference? And the one thing that Google added to make it a little bit different is the human element of it, where these topics are actually selected by human beings. So the cohorts, instead of being done by AI, are instead selected by human beings. And I said, do we know which human beings, how many human beings are in charge of this? What kind of we don't know really the internal
Well, they had to do with
by which
something
they
with
choose
the
these
Gmail
topics.
man guy. He's been unemployed for several years.
He's still around. Right?
Exactly. Versus FLoC, which had, because it was AI, there were so many subsets of groups. These cohorts could get pretty small, and that is, topics would be more general. But
again, it's a big but.
Yeah, it's all, that's all still the same thing. I just wonder though, if we're looking at third-party cookies, the way things that are done right now, the tracking that takes place, versus this more generalized approach, I think I would rather be less identifiable than more identifiable. But go ahead.
I can't point you to an exact data source for this, but my understanding is that long ago it was determined that non-contextual advertising was just as effective as contextual advertising, and it's a lot easier. You know, it's basically like the spam mail you get still some days still in your mailbox, just that we're just going to throw this out to everybody. So they're going to all this. This is the computer industry in a nutshell. This is so Microsoft too. I'm surprised they're not more involved in this. It's like, we'll spend a lot of time looking at telemetry data until we get the result we want. And then we'll use that as the justification for some crazy AI-based scheme to sell you hair tonic or, fruit water or whatever it is. Because for some reason you showed some interest in that. God, does everyone? I mean, seriously, so you do it's like this is as dumb as I buy my mother a book for her birthday on Amazon, and then I start getting recommendations on Amazon based on a book for an older woman that is not the type of thing I'm interested in. Like, there is computer science behind that. It's just deeply flawed, Yeah. And I don't understand why people would want this kind of thing. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nobody wants it. Nobody wants it, right? Like, I mean, They've
Well,
kind
they're
of
resigned
tricked you
to
into
it. They're
thinking
resigned to it.
There you
right?
go, resigned
They're,
to it.
Well, yeah, it's like when Google Maps is such a necessary thing. It's incredible to me that I went anywhere on this earth by myself on a piece of paper showing me directions. Right? Would never go back to that. But even Google Maps, looking at the surface of it, has become a vector for spam. It just shows me places that businesses have paid to be placed on the map instead of the things I'm looking for. I had a problem. We were away for a couple of weeks looking for, I had pinned things explicitly so I could find them, and I was shown other restaurants instead of the ones I knew I wanted to go to because those businesses paid for that. And it's like, okay, I mean, I know, and some people are like, Paul, what are you complaining about? It's a free service. Yep. What I'm saying is there should be a better way, and I know a paid option isn't for everybody. But there are things that I think are valuable enough that I would certainly, and there are literally things that I pay for that are valuable to me. I would pay for this stuff to be better if I could, and I wish that was an option.
Yeah, an option. There you go. I think that's the thing, is that having one or the other, that's where the complication comes in. I want to be incredibly aware of folks who are not able to necessarily make that per month expenditure, but if you're able to have that option is good. By
the way, you mentioned the company you work for, and I mentioned the company I work for in advertising and everything. I mean, in a way, there's some targeting. The notion that someone who's listening to a show about Windows or Google or the Mac or whatever is probably interested in technology, and a lot of these advertisers are going to be tech-based or whatever. A lot of them aren't. I mean, in many ways, but there's no targeting of individuals. Like, how horrible would our worlds be if that's what the ads were on all these things we're creating? Like, literally going after each person individually as they hit your podcast or your website or whatever it might, your YouTube channel or whatever. You're not seeing like the ad that everyone sees, like when you watch the Super Bowl. You're seeing the ad that's for you. We noticed you were searching for some embarrassing medical thing maybe, or some whatever it was, and now that's what you start seeing everywhere around the world. Like, this is not, isn't this clearly not the way?
In fact, it was I will just say this. I have realized a couple of times where a social media network has made certain assumptions about me and used those assumptions to serve me ads that fall into stereotypical categories. And that's not cool. That's not okay. Right. That's not,
it's not just not sophisticated, it's inappropriate. And
it's inappropriate. There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
I agree. Well, it is appropriate to take a break right now before we come back with Xbox Corner. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll head into the Xbox. So, Mary Jo, put on your slippers, get your bubble pipe, and feel free to
Micah,
kick
we
back.
have a big surprise for you. The first story in the Xbox segment.
Mary Jo's going to be doing the first story.
Inserted by Mary Jo. That's right.
All right, so don't get your bubble pipe just yet. We will take a quick break, though, so I can tell you about Melissa. You've heard of Melissa. To ensure your business is successful, your customer information needs to be accurate. Makes sense. Almost 15% of the U.S. population moves every year. And that's a lot of customers that your business could be missing out on. Melissa can help make sure your data is current and accurate. Melissa is both experienced and independent, and has more than 35 years of data quality expertise, which explains why more than 10,000 businesses know them as the address experts. Melissa also has a renewal rate of more than 92%, because 25% is the typical ROI for Melissa customers. You can verify email addresses, actual addresses, phone numbers, and names in real time with Melissa. Melissa's global address verification service verifies addresses for 240 plus countries and territories at the point of entry. If you're tired of duplicate customer information in your database, Melissa's data matching will help eliminate clutter and duplicates, increasing the accuracy of the database while reducing postage and mailing costs. Batch address cleansing will process an entire entire address list for accuracy and completeness. Identity verification will reduce risk, ensure compliance, and keep customers happy. Geocoding enrichments will convert addresses into lat-long coordinates. Interesting. And email verification, which will remove up to 95% of bad email addresses from your database. Melissa's flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, business size, or budget, with flexible on-prem, web service, secure FTP processing, and software as a service delivery options. So covering it all. Melissa also has their new Lookups app. It's on iOS and on Google, on Android, to search addresses, names, and more at your fingertips. And Melissa continually undergoes independent security audits to reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. They are SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliant. Melissa's Global Support Center also offers, this is awesome, 24/7 world-renowned support if you sign up for a service level agreement, so inquire today. Melissa continues to be a leader in the field. You can join us in congratulating Melissa for being named to the Data Quality Magic Quadrant by Gartner for the second consecutive year. Oh, and also G2 Crowd's 2022 report, which ranks Melissa as a leader in both address verification and data quality software. Yeah, trust the address experts. Make sure your customer contact data is up to date. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, to sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Seriously, you can go and play. I've done it. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. Thank you, Melissa, for sponsoring this week's episode of Windows Weekly. We appreciate you. All right, Mary Jo Foley in some bizarro universe is kicking off Xbox Corner this week.
I am. The reason is there was a report this week by Bloomberg that said it's looking like the FTC, not the DOJ, is going to be the organization in the U.S. that ends up reviewing the Microsoft Activision deal for potential antitrust concerns. So this is significant for a few reasons. One is the FTC, at least under President Biden, is taking a much harder line on big tech, right? And they're before it would just be like, oh yeah, it's fine, whatever. Any tech company can buy anybody, and no big deal. But the FTC now has shown its hand, and basically they're not in favor of just rubber stamping these kinds of big tech acquisitions. Reportedly, the reason they're going to give this closer scrutiny is because they're afraid Microsoft might not make the games from Activision available on all platforms, although Microsoft has been pretty adamant in trying to quell that fear. And then I also saw an interesting thing on the New York Post, of all places. I know, this is surprising, but
I knew it.
I know, right? So they, you know what's funny? The New York Post every once in a while has really good tech coverage, and it's every time they break a story, I'm like, oh, that's surprising. But yeah, when was this? January, like a couple weeks ago, before the Bloomberg story. They had a story saying the DOJ's antitrust chief worked for Microsoft in the past. The antitrust chief is Jonathan Cantor. And it says because he did previously work for Microsoft, he was going to have to recuse himself from looking at the Activision deal. And that opened
was he
the door
like
for
drinking buddies with Bill Newcomb or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, so he may not even be able, like, legally to be the one to review this, right? It says in the New York Post story, Cantor spent more than a decade as a legal advisor and lobbyist for Microsoft on regulatory issues. So, yeah, you would think he probably is not going to be allowed to review the Activision deal because of conflict of interest. But yeah, Microsoft knew this was likely going to happen. Not the FTC part necessarily, but they knew they were going to get antitrust scrutiny, and that's why they had predicted that the deal wouldn't even close until middle of 2023 at best. So yeah, Paul and I both have said on the show we didn't think that the deal would be held up for antitrust concerns, and I still feel like it won't.
Yeah. Right. Me too.
But this also kind of opens the door to, will they request any kinds of special concessions, or will there be like caveats that will have to be made explicit for Microsoft?
We could call it a consent decree, perhaps, that Microsoft
I hope it's not going to go that way, right? Been there, done that. We don't need another one of those, right? Yeah. Yeah, so I think it was worth mentioning, because it's not just going to be smooth sailing, rubber stamping. Yeah, Microsoft gets to buy Activision. There's definitely going to be a lot of scrutiny, not just here, but in all the other countries that have to approve this.
Right.
Yep.
Makes sense. Well, I guess, we'll see how that ends up. It's probably good then that Sony, for example, is, I know you're going to get to this, but it's probably good that then other organizations are making acquisitions similar to this, so that it doesn't feel very antitrusty, as it were.
Well, Microsoft was quick to point out that with this acquisition, they would become the third biggest player in the gaming market after who? Who's the first one? Sony's number 2. And what was the first? Geez, I already forgot. It was like
Tencent.
The company behind Tencent. Thank you.
Yeah, Tencent.
The point being, this seems like a huge acquisition, but it doesn't vault us in the first place. These companies are still bigger than we are. In some ways, this makes the competition a little fairer, perhaps, which makes me sound like a lobbyist. So I'm not going to go down that path for too much longer. But
bad math.
That's exactly bad thinking. That's the argument, I guess.
Got it. All right, now the fuzzy slippers, the bubble pipe, etc., because it's time for the rest of Xbox Corner. Tell us what's going on with Xbox, Paul.
Yeah, a lot, actually, as you might expect. The UK's Competition and Markets Authority, which is kind of like a consumer organization, I would call it, consumer fairness organization, has investigated Microsoft for auto-renewing Xbox subscriptions, right? So this is across Xbox Live Gold and all the Game Pass products. And what they found is what I found. I think a lot of people have found, not just Microsoft, but this is the whole point, I think, of subscription services. You forget you're paying for it, right? And especially if it's like an annual subscription, you get hit by this, $60, $100, whatever it is thing every January or every March or whatever it is. And you have no idea what it's for. And I literally just experienced this. I have a JetBlue credit card that I don't use anymore because I don't live in Boston, which was a hub for JetBlue. And I just got a $8 or $9 charge from Microsoft for something. And when I looked at it, when I looked at my account, it didn't come from my primary account. So it's coming from some secondary account. It's possible at some point I did something for my son maybe, or did something for a secondary account because I was writing a book, or I have no idea. I literally have not figured out what it's for. But this type of thing happens a lot. And so what they've done is gone back to Microsoft and said, hey, you need to fix this. And so Microsoft has agreed. It's going to take a little while, but they're going to basically be more transparent and upfront in their communications with subscribers about a variety of things related to auto-renew subscriptions, and will offer refunds, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is in the UK, so I don't know that this applies to everybody worldwide. I'm sure it does not, but I'd like to see that kind of thing happen. But it's a first step. Microsoft doesn't come under a lot of scrutiny these days compared to the Amazons, Apples, Googles, Facebooks of the world. But this is a little minor example of something positive, I would say. And then it is February 2nd today, so it's a new month, and that means that we get new games through Xbox Game Pass for the first half of the month, and also Xbox Games with Gold. So if you have an Xbox Live Gold subscription or Xbox Game Pass subscription of any kind, you get access to those 4 games every month for free. Nothing jumps up at me for these 4 games. I've honestly not even heard of most of them. Broken Sword 5, Aerial Never Yield, Hydrophobia, I assume is the fear of water, and Band of Bugs. I don't know what any of those games are, I'm sorry, but they're all free this month. And then for Xbox Game Pass, 8, 9, 10, I guess 10 new games coming in the first half of the month. We'll learn more about the second half of the month as we get toward it. The big one there is probably Ark, although there's a game called Crossfire. It looks really good too. Crossfire X, I should say. Single player campaign shooter type game. So that's cool. Flight Simulator is getting its set, or already got its 7th world update. And this is where they add like really high detailed imagery for certain parts of the world. They've done various parts of the world, US, South America, Europe, et cetera. Now they're onto Australia. So that's really cool. That's available no matter how you get Flight Simulator.
You can fly over
they
the
added-
Opera House and see little people
so it's
inside
like
of it.
four airports, high-resolution DSLs for over 100 other airports, 94 custom points of interest, 16 new activities, 5 bush trips, 6 discovery flights, and 5 landing challenges. So this is just like the gift that keeps on giving. Like if you're into Flight Simulator, you'll never get tired of it. This is amazing how much they've added over time.
Do they have wildlife in Flight Simulator?
Wildlife, like you fly over like the
kangaroo horde.
Animals. Oh, I'm not sure. No, that's interesting. I don't know.
That would be cool.
That would be cool, actually. Yeah. A couple of Sony related things. You mentioned earlier acquisitions. So Sony announced this past week they're going to acquire Bungie. Now, Bungie is the game studio most famous for having created Halo, but Bungie doesn't own Halo anymore because Bungie was bought by Microsoft back in 2000, I think it was. They developed the first, I guess it was 4 major Halo games and some other Halo little, kind of mobile games. They were spun off from Microsoft, went independent again, made 2 Destiny games that did really well, but not like Halo well. I mean, it's like not quite like going from Star Wars to Howard the Duck, but kind of obviously not in the same category. Those games were being that's a stretch. Those games were distributed by Activision, interestingly, but they actually cut that deal, and now Sony has acquired them. Now Sony, kind of looking over at Microsoft, has said, "Hey, don't worry, we're going to keep this company independent. The games are going to be available cross-platform. We're not changing anything like that." Hint, hint, hint. Microsoft, and I think you can expect Sony and EA and other big players in the industry to start. I think this is going to be a huge year for video game acquisitions. I mean, compared to Activision, it's not humongous. $3.6 billion is still, pretty serious for a little studio of 100 people or whatever it is that, has basically one game. I mean, it's kind of interesting that they're doing that, but I think content is king and that's where they're heading. So there they go. And then Sony just released its quarterly earnings and they have sold, let's see, 3.9 million PlayStation 5 consoles in the quarter, a total of 17.3. That is below where they were with the PlayStation 4, by the way. 20 million is where they were at this time in that history. But of course, now we have a component shortage problem. So it's kind of interesting. Like they actually had it was kind of a bad quarter for video games for them. I mean, everything was down basically, like first party, third party, content, add-on content, I should say, peripherals, PS4 hardware, which is on the way out. All that stuff is like less. It's just less. I think Sony launched with a lot of great first party content last year, and they did really well because obviously it was the launch quarter. But I don't know, like their game and network services business unit, their revenues dropped 70% year over year, and they're like number one, sort of. I guess if you pretend Nintendo doesn't exist, which we do. And then finally, this is really Epic is involved in some Epic lawsuits right now against Apple and Google. And they got kind of what I would call a mixed ruling in the Apple case. They are appealing it, and they have gotten the support of all companies, Microsoft. And the Microsoft filing is actually really important, especially if you pay attention to people who know more about this than I do, like Florian Mueller over at the Foss Patents blog, who kind of explains how Microsoft, as a big tech company that kind of does things like Apple in the sense that they have an app store of their own and they have their own percentages and things that they do and their own ways of dealing with their partners, is completely different from Apple. Microsoft has been victimized by Apple, actually, in the App Store. As you know, they wanted to bring Xbox Game Pass there, and Apple wanted them to release every single game separately so they could get a little, tax on each one of those things. Microsoft didn't think that was right. It's not right. I mean, they don't do that to Netflix, for example, which is basically the same business model. It's very strange. So anyway, it's very interesting to me that Microsoft not only is backing Epic, but they're doing so forcefully. If you look at the Microsoft filing, the language they use is very direct and I think proper. I think Apple's on the wrong side of history on this one. So I think that's kind of interesting. So we'll see where this goes, but it's cool to see them do this. They also have the support of 35 U.S. states, which is rather interesting if you include D.C., which I know is not a state, but it should be. The electronic, the EFF is backing them as well. But anyway, I'm more concerned about Microsoft. It's interesting to see Microsoft kind of step up and just be vocally critical of Apple in this case, which I think is correct. So good to see them on the right side of history for a change.
Yep.
There you go.
All right. We will head into the tips and picks in just a moment. Tips and picks are next. All right. Actually, there is an interesting question, and I'm curious if you, if either of you know the answer to this.
We do not.
Sarah, okay. Oh, I thought you were in the chat, so you saw. Sarah in the chat said, when are we going to get DirectStorage for Windows 11 PC? It was promoted last June or July. Do you know? I don't know what that is, so I don't know for sure. So
DirectStorage is a feature from the Xbox that Microsoft said was coming to Windows 10 originally, if I'm not mistaken, and then Windows 11 happened. Surprise, surprise. It is, I believe. It's not. Yeah, it hasn't been delivered. I think it's just available in a developer preview right now, isn't it? I think that's the last.
I don't remember. I remember this came up.
I remember this came up, but I don't remember where we're at with it now.
So basically, what all this is just a way for games to have really fast access to storage, and it requires a special, very fast SSD type. So the SSDs that are built into the new Xbox consoles have, meet a certain set of criteria, and then I think they're on Windows 10 or now 11. I assume, actually, I shouldn't assume. I don't remember. I don't remember what the decision was on 10. I know obviously it's going to be a feature of Windows 11. It's possible it's not going to be part of 10 now. I'm not sure.
Not part of 11, you mean?
No, it's going to be part of 11. It's possible they won't put it in 10 because, a lot of the Windows 10 performance improvements are, compared to Windows 10 are kind of artificial. It's like something they could have done to both, but they're only doing to 11 to give it that difference. I'm not sure of this. I don't know that there is a schedule.
Yeah.
I will have to look into that. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, we will keep our eyes peeled for that. Let's do the tips and picks. Tip of the week.
Well, we're screwing everything up here again because
I know.
Mary Jo's doing the
tip of the week.
Whoa! I feel so.
Yeah.
We just threw the show in a blender and said, "Let's see what comes out the other side."
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a tip I got from Twitter. Our friend who listens to the show a lot, Taro Elhonen, was talking to, I think it was Brad Sams, and Brad was like, man, Edge has so many pop-ups now. The Bing Rewards pop-ups, the shopping pop-ups, this pop-up, that pop-up. Even a pop-up to say, why don't you try using Edge on your mobile device? Whether or not you are using it, doesn't even matter. You get that pop-up too. And Brad said, I wish there was a way to stop this. And Taro said, there is. And I was like, wait, there is a way? And so the way is to go into Edge flags, which is where the experimental features are for Edge, and find the one that says Edge Show Feature Recommendations, and you can disable it. And I did that this week, and I haven't gotten any pop-ups so far since. My question is, will the pop-ups resume once you get a new version of Edge sent to you through whatever channel you're in? Like if you're in the stable channel, like me, for instance. When I go to the next version of Edge, will I have to go back in and disable this again? Probably, but that's a small price to pay to get rid of these pop-ups. Paul and I were talking before the show and saying, we really both liked Edge at the start when it first came out as a Chromium-based browser. It seemed like they were going the right way. And increasingly, there are all these things that are really not just annoying, but like they hinder your productivity. When these pop-ups come up, they don't cover like a little bit of your screen. They cover like a chunk of it. And if you've got something on that side that you're trying to do, it's like completely covers up your work. And like I said earlier, I don't really care about ads. Like I don't notice them that much or care about them. But here's one place I do care about it because it's impacting my ability to get things done in the browser.
I wanted to follow up on this DirectStorage thing because I was confused. I couldn't figure out anything here.
Okay.
The last we heard about this was last July. And at that time, what Microsoft said was, don't worry, we are still going to bring this to Windows 10. But they didn't address the Windows 11 thing because the original announcement around Windows 11 that there would be special DirectStorage optimized PCs sold by PC makers that were pre-configured with both, because it requires not just the hardware, but special drivers, which may not be, broadly available. Like, you may not be able to just buy an SSD and get this. So this is still kind of a weird gray area, whether this requires you to buy like a special gaming PC that has this, and whether or not those are even available. I believe that they are. And where they had left it last July, which I think I searched my own site to find this, but I that was a developer preview, and I think that's still where we are. I don't think that has advanced past that. So sorry about that. Epic of the week. So I mentioned Epic Games earlier. If you are a PC gamer, you should be taking advantage of this. Epic Games has a store, and it's one of many places where you can buy PC games. It's a great option. It's kind of an alternative to Steam or now the Microsoft Store and the Xbox stuff that Microsoft is doing. But the one big difference between the Epic Game Store and these other stores is that they give away a free game like every week. And it's free. It's free. It's free to the tune of you don't even have to give your personal information to the company that made the game. That's an option you have. The game this week is called Demon vs. Machina. It's a mech warrior type title, 3D, looks pretty good. But every once in a while, like the game they give away is incredible. Like this is something you should just be paying attention to. So definitely become part of the Epic Game Store. It's free. Just become a customer. Or to have an account there, and then just take a look at this every week. It's a good system if you're a PC gamer,
like Mary Jo.
Like Mary Jo, that's right. Try to get her hooked on the Xbox, but she won't get off the damn PC.
All right, tell us what's going on in the enterprise, unless Paul's going to do it because everything is backward.
It's not that crazy. Let's not get crazy.
Okay.
So my enterprise pick of the week is a little bit self-serving, but I want people to know about this. Sorry, Sorechi is like putting his butt in the camera. Stop. I'm starting to do a new podcast. It's a once a month podcast, and it's called the DOM Briefing, DOM. DOM is Directions on Microsoft. I feel like this is a group of analysts who I really trust. I quote them a lot in my work. They're independent from Microsoft, and I feel like they don't really get their due, but they cover a lot of the things that enterprises care a lot about, very thorny issues around licensing and pricing and product terms and the changing enterprise landscape for different Microsoft products. They do roadmaps. They do all this kind of stuff. So I went to them and I said, would you guys do a podcast with me where I interview one of your analysts every month about some kind of very deep technical or in-depth issue in the enterprise around these topics? I think people would care because I feel like there's a real dearth of information about these kinds of things. And I think we can make it fun in the podcast. And so they said yes. So we've already done the first one, and it's up, available, and free on directionsonmicrosoft.com. The first one was about the cloud. We've got lots more coming up, and it's going to, like I said, once a month, me interviewing their analysts who are the experts on all this stuff. And I'm not the expert. I'm just like the facilitator here. But yeah, anybody who cares about licensing, pricing, product roadmaps, I think you might be very interested in this. It's called the DOM Briefing for Directions on Microsoft.
That is so cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. Trying to make enterprise licensing fun. It's a big job. Someone's got to do it.
There you go. Exactly. You're the new Mike Rowe. Dirty jobs here. No, that's really cool. Directionsonmicrosoft.com.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Tell us about the developer. Oh, and of course, folks, we'll have a link in the show notes. So if you're listening, you're going, where do I find it? There'll be a link in the show notes. Yep. Developer pick of the week.
Yeah. So this month, .NET is turning 20. It's their 20th anniversary of the creation of .NET, which is crazy. There's not a lot of software that's still around 20 years later, but .NET is still here and going gangbusters, right? to commemorate this, Microsoft has a site up on the web now called .net.microsoft.com. You go to that site and you can find out about some activities they're planning around the anniversary. The one on Valentine's Day, February 14th, sounds very interesting to me. It's only 30 minutes, which is surprising, but it's going to be a live broadcast. They're promising that they'll have some Illuminati from the .NET world, so I'm not sure who exactly will be on there, but there'll be like some live chatting going on and celebrating the 20 years. They've got a pivotal history of .NET up on here, and they talk about a little bit about how it came to be and such. Then the next day is another event that's not directly related, but somewhat related. I mentioned this on last week's show, the Azure Open Source Day. And then in March, it's Visual Studio's 25th anniversary, and they're going to do a broadcast on St. Patrick's Day. I guess they're big into using the holidays to do their celebrations, which is cool. So yeah, February 14th, I'm very curious who they bring out for this .NET anniversary broadcast. It starts at 9 a.m.
I think
Pacific.
we should speculate.
Yeah, who do you think is going to be there?
Well, I think they're going to bring out Don Box.
You do?
Chris Anderson, of course.
I don't know. Don Box went to Meta,
Anders.
so maybe.
I know, but that's why they got to bring him back. He played such a key role.
He did. Anders would be good to put on there.
Anders.
Right? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the site that you just recommended has a little video about the history of .NET. And just off the top of my head, I'm going to get this a little bit wrong, but it goes from, it's like 2000, 2002, 2015. Like, well, guys, hold on a second.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing that happened in the middle there that's actually really important, including the fact that they tried to kill .NET with Longhorn with something called WinFX. And then they were like, oh, we're just kidding. It's .NET 3 point whatever.
Never mind.
and we're going to backport it to XP. Originally that was going to be Longhorn only. So there's a whole rich history there that's very interesting. And you're right, 30 minutes is not going to, they could spend 2 hours on that. They could do a series like that thing they did on the Xbox recently.
I'm guessing it's just going to be the tip of the iceberg. Like there'll be that 30-minute thing, and then there'll be more.
Okay.
Like blog
I hope so,
posts
because I don't think people appreciate how important .NET is.
Yeah, and how it's stuck around and morphed over time and been very resilient.
Yep. And how pervasive it is, and how it started as yet another terrible Windows-only thing and is now a wonderful open-source cross-platform thing.
Yep. Indeed.
Yep.
So yeah, that should be fun. Something to look forward to on Valentine's Day. Get sweet with .NET.
Well, the restaurant's a book, folks. You got to do something.
You got to do something.
Before we do the beer pick of the week, folks are asking, I hope that it is clear to everyone that you can always get the show notes for whatever show you're looking for. Twit.tv. In this case, it's twit.tv/ww/the show number. So the show notes for this episode will be twit.tv/ww/762. When the show is published, you'll be able to get the show notes there, which will have a link to Mary Jo's podcast. I went to the site, Mary Jo. I didn't see an RSS feed yet for the podcast.
Yeah, they're
is
working
it published?
on it. They're working on
cool.
it.
So
Not
that'll
yet.
be soon.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah, and the
All right.
transcripts of our shows are up there too, right?
Awesome.
I saw on Twitch site. I'm like, oh, good. The transcripts of the shows are back.
Oh, yes, for Windows Weekly,
Right?
yes.
Yeah.
I think nearly all of our shows on the network now have transcripts for each show.
That's cool.
So, you can always check that out as well. Again, twit.tv/ww, then a slash, and then whatever the show number is. And a lot of podcast apps will pull in some of that, but I don't think it always grabs everything. So that's why you want to go to the site to do that. All right. Tell us about the beer pick of the week.
Okay. This is a very funny beer pick. It's from a brewery in Bulgaria called Sofia Electric Brewing. I looked them up, and here's what it says. It says, we are the best brewery built in an old refrigerator factory. We believe that good beer is a basic human right, and great beer is what we produce. So I have a friend who went to Bulgaria recently, and he brought back a can of this beer called Small Steps, Giant Leaps. And we were having a beer tasting this past weekend, and he said, everybody's got to try this beer. And I saw on the can, it said New England IPA. I'm like, this is going to be terrible. Bulgarian beer, purporting to be a New England IPA, which is like a hazy IPA. It was amazing. It was fantastic. And it was brewed exactly like any New England IPA I've ever had. Totally true to the style. And it came in a really cute small can, not a big can, I guess because it's called Small Steps, Giant Leaps. I would give it a really high mark against any IPA that I've had in the United States. And it brings up an interesting point, which is when you go to a lot of countries outside the U.S. now, they're making American-style beers. Like, it's very prominent, even in places that kind of ridiculed American beer, rightly so, from years ago. Now they're all making, like, American-style IPAs and American this, American that. And it was just so funny to see a beer from Sophia that said it's a New England IPA, and it was. It was a very good one, too.
Awesome. Yeah, I like the look at the little can. Small steps, giant leaps.
Yep.
Nice.
One small step for man, one giant leap for IPAs. All right. I believe that brings us to the end of this episode of Windows Weekly. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Of course, this show records every Wednesday. Oh, man, now I'm forgetting what time this show starts. Every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. So you can tune in twit.tv/live if you want to watch us live while we record the show. But you can also subscribe to the show. We think that's kind of the best way of doing it because you get it as soon as it's available. twit.tv/WW. There you can choose to subscribe to audio or video, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, for the time being, unless everybody leaves the platform, YouTube. We're in all those different places, so you can get the show there. Now's a good time to mention the Club Twit. We had some great chatters today in the club. Twit.tv/clubtwit is how you check that out. For $7 a month, you get every one of Twitch shows ad-free. We were talking about this just earlier on the show. You also get access to the exclusive Twit Plus bonus feed that has content you won't find anywhere else. I think today it'll include a bit of the before the show conversation about things we root for and things we don't. It also has AMAs, I believe, including one with Mary Jo Foley in that feed. So it's awesome to check out. And then last but not least is access to the Discord server. If you're wondering what the heck a Discord server is, well, if you've ever used Slack or Microsoft Teams, it's similar to that. It's a place to chat with your fellow Club Twit members, but also many of us here at Twit are in that chat quite frequently. Now's a good time to also mention that there is a Twit audience survey that we are working on right now. That's because we want to make sure that we are talking to all of you out there, that we're getting, that we're knowledgeable of who you are. So you can head to twit.tv/survey22 to check out the survey. It'll only take you a couple of minutes. In testing it, I filled out the survey about 8 times, and it only took me a few minutes. So I promise it'll take you less than that. Twit.tv/survey22 so we can know all of you. Mary Jo Foley, all about Microsoft.com. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mike.
And Paul Thurrott of Thurrott.com, THURROTT.com. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir.
And everyone have a brilliant rest of your day or night, depending on when you're watching this. Leo should be back next week. So until then, it's time to say goodbye.
The world is changing rapidly. So rapidly, in fact, that it's hard to keep up. That's why Micah Sargent and I, Jason Howell, talk with the people making and breaking the tech news on Tech News Weekly every Thursday. They know these stories better than anyone, so why not get them to talk about it in their own words? Subscribe to Tech News Weekly, and you won't miss a beat every Thursday at twit.tv.